Welcome, the anointed ones. When the enemy isolates you, it's never because you're weak. It's because your presence was too powerful for the room. They didn't cut you off out of spite. Oh no, they cut you off out of fear. Not fear of who you were back then, but fear of who you'd become if you ever figured out who you really are. Let me tell you something wild. According to psychological studies, social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Yeah, your brain literally interprets being isolated like you got punched in the face. So when they exiled you, excluded you, ignored you, and acted like you didn't exist, that wasn't just emotional cruelty, that was neural warfare. But here's where it gets hilarious. They thought they were hurting you. What they really did was sponsor your transformation. They didn't know they were handing you the exact silence God needed to rewrite your whole story. Now they're watching you glow from the very dark place they threw you into. And they're sitting there like, wait, how did isolation make them stronger? Meanwhile, you're over here building empires in peace, drinking your water, minding your vibration. And they're somewhere choking on the silence they thought would finish you. So today we're breaking it all down. Their plan to isolate you backfired terribly. Now they're choking on regret. Because this ain't just karma, this is a divine reversal so poetic even the angels are slow clapping. Let's talk about it. Number 1. They mistook your solitude for defeat, but you were being recalibrated by the divine. They thought when they pulled away, cut you off, and made you feel like you were no longer welcome, it would break you. They were convinced that by isolating you, you'd spiral, that without their presence, validation, or approval, you'd be lost. What they never expected was that removing you from the noise would connect you to something far more powerful than them, the divine. They didn't realize you weren't being abandoned. You were being recalibrated, reset, stripped of distractions so you could finally hear something deeper than gossip and fake laughter. You started hearing truth. When they left, all that empty space they created in your life wasn't filled with bitterness. It got filled with clarity. You saw through the roles they were playing, the masks, the manipulation. In their minds, they were teaching you a lesson. But they didn't realize you were the one being awakened, and the lesson ended up being theirs. You weren't collapsing in loneliness. You were being upgraded in solitude. And when you came out of that silence, you weren't just healed. You were sharper, stronger, cleaner, and more dangerous to their illusions than ever before. They expected to return one day and find you desperate, still waiting, still hurt. Instead, they came back to someone they didn't recognize. Not bitter, just uninterested. Not spiteful, just unavailable. The version of you they were comfortable mistreating no longer exists. You didn't bounce back into their lives. You outgrew them. You healed in places they never thought you'd even look at. That scares them. Because it means they have no control anymore. Their old tricks don't work on the new you. Their opinions hold no weight. Their access revoked. The irony? They thought they were punishing you. But all they did was remove themselves from the front row of your transformation. Now they're stuck on the outside, watching your rise, knowing they had a seat and gave it up. That's not regret. That's torment. Number 2, they created a vacuum, and that's exactly where God spoke loudest. They thought taking people away from you would break you, that cutting you off from conversations, support, and connection would silence you. They didn't just want you alone, they wanted you empty. They assumed the quiet would crush you, that the loneliness would drain you until you came crawling back. But they misunderstood how chosen ones are wired. The moment everything went still, that's when the shift started. The space they thought would swallow you whole, it became the exact environment God needed to speak directly to you, without interruption, without noise, without their influence muddying the message. While they were out there gossiping and scheming, you were in solitude receiving revelations. You started seeing what you weren't allowed to see when you were distracted by chaos. You started hearing what you couldn't hear when you were surrounded by fake love. The vacuum they created by isolating you didn't consume you, it cleansed you. You stopped absorbing the bitterness, the envy, the projections, and without all of that distortion, you finally remembered who you are. not the version they convinced you to be. The real you, the original one, the powerful one. They thought they removed your voice. But what they really did was give your inner voice the microphone. And once you heard it clearly, you couldn't go back. That voice started guiding you differently. It gave you wisdom you didn't know you had, vision you didn't know you could trust, power you didn't know you carried. That's the part they can't understand. They thought they took everything when they took themselves away, but you didn't need them. You needed space. And when you finally had it, you tapped into a version of yourself they tried to bury. Now they're confused. Why are you so calm? Why are you glowing? Why are you rising? Because you were never alone. You were just being rerouted to something they never had access to. And now that you're walking in divine instruction, they can't keep up. Because your silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. Number 3. They thought exiling you would make you powerless, but you stopped absorbing their inferior frequencies. They thought cutting you off would weaken you, that being excluded from the group, the conversations, the invites, would somehow make you shrink. But what actually happened is, without their energy constantly in your space, you stopped absorbing all the low vibrations they were masking as friendship, love, or concern. You started noticing how much lighter you felt. Not because you had fewer people around, but because the people who left were never genuinely for you in the first place. The isolation they forced on you became the exact condition you needed to detox from every lie, every fake smile, and every ounce of spiritual poison they were feeding you behind your back. They didn't realize how much noise they carried until they were gone. You started sleeping better, thinking clearer. You weren't constantly second-guessing yourself anymore. You weren't walking on eggshells or adjusting your energy to make others feel comfortable. You had finally unplugged from their frequency, and without realizing it, they had gifted you that freedom. In their arrogance, they assumed you needed their energy to feel whole. But once they were gone, you realized just how heavy that energy really was. It wasn't love, it was control. It wasn't friendship, it was access. It wasn't care, it was surveillance. The longer you stayed disconnected, the more you started to glow. You began noticing your own energy for what it truly was. Powerful, healing, magnetic. And that's when the regret kicked in on their side. Because now, when they try to return, your energy literally repels them. It's not even personal. It's spiritual. You vibrated out of their reach and they know it. The very isolation they thought would reduce you ended up being the reason they can't touch you now. They created distance, thinking you'd collapse. But the distance only made you remember your worth, rebuild your boundaries, and reclaim your peace. That backfired badly. And now all they can do is watch you from the same space they created and realize they no longer belong there. Number 4. They wanted you surrounded by emptiness, but you became the voice in the void. They were counting on your silence. They wanted the emptiness around you to crush your spirit, to convince you that your voice didn't matter, that you were forgotten, irrelevant, and alone. Their plan was simple. Remove the noise, remove the people, remove the platform, then sit back and watch you disappear. But what they didn't expect is that in the quiet, something deep inside you came alive, something they had no access to, something they couldn't control. You didn't fade. You found your real voice. And when you did, it wasn't just words. It was truth, raw and untamed. It wasn't crafted for applause or approval. It was born in fire. While they were mocking you in groups, you were having conversations with your soul. While they were gossiping, you were growing. Your silence didn't equal weakness. It was preparation. And when you spoke again, it wasn't to prove a point. It was to deliver a message that would echo beyond the people who left you. You became a voice for the unheard, a mirror for the unseen, a signal for the misjudged. People started finding you, not because you were loud, but because you were real. While others shouted to be noticed, your stillness drew in those starving for something genuine. And that's when the ones who tried to silence you started panicking. Because suddenly, your words were reaching more ears than theirs ever did. Your authenticity traveled in ways their performance never could. What they intended to destroy became your stage. They tried to mute you, and now your voice won't stop ringing in their heads. They tried to erase you, and now your truth is being shared in rooms they can't enter. You didn't need a crowd to find your power. You needed emptiness, because only in the void did your real sound emerge, and now that it has, it's unstoppable. Number 5. They wrote you off, but in doing so, they wrote their own obituary in your story. When they cut you off, they truly believed they were closing the chapter on you, that walking away, mocking you, or acting like you didn't matter would somehow freeze your growth. They expected your story to stop because they stopped showing up. But what actually happened is that their exit gave your narrative space to evolve. Their absence wasn't a dead end, it was a plot twist. And now that the story's gotten good, they're shocked to see the spotlight shining without their name anywhere in the script. They thought they were the main characters. They assumed your success needed their cosign. So when they distanced themselves, it wasn't just personal, it was intentional. They thought subtracting their presence would subtract your progress. But here you are, thriving, rising, moving forward without them. And the truth is, your story didn't stall. It got stronger, cleaner, more refined. Their removal wasn't a loss. It was a much-needed edit. Now the irony is undeniable. The very people who thought your worth depended on their presence are realizing they've become irrelevant in the narrative of your life. They're no longer a part of your growth arc. They're not central characters. They're barely side notes. You didn't get bitter. You got better. You didn't seek revenge. You just stopped writing them in. And now that the story is taking off, they want back in. But the pen isn't in their hands anymore. It's in yours. They wrote you off thinking it was permanent, but all they did was write themselves out. They didn't kill your light. They just removed their shadow from it. And what's burning now is undeniable. You're not just moving on, you're becoming unforgettable. And they're stuck on the outside realizing that not only did they not stop your story, they ended their role in it. You kept turning pages, and they've become the chapter that no one rereads. Number 6. Isolation forced you into mastery while they remained codependent on their groupthink. When they pushed you into isolation, they thought they were stripping you of your lifeline. They believed that by cutting off your support system or making you feel like the outsider, they'd weaken you. Meanwhile, they stayed huddled in their little cliques, repeating the same tired opinions back and forth, depending on each other to feel smart, right, and relevant. But that groupthink became their prison, while your isolation became your forge. You were alone, but you weren't wasting that silence. You studied. You listened. You healed. You sharpened your instincts. You learned to think for yourself without the need for a crowd to confirm it. You stopped chasing reactions and started building results. And while they were busy copying each other and trying to fit into the same tired mold, you were shaping yourself into something original, something bold, something they can't replicate. That isolation forced you to grow up emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. There was no one around to hype you up, so you learned how to push yourself. There was no one clapping, so you learned how to move without applause. No validation, no echo chamber, just you, raw and unfiltered, facing your own thoughts, fears, and brilliance. That kind of solitude doesn't break the real ones. It builds them. It forces discipline. It forces vision. And most of all, it forces mastery. Now look at the difference. They still rely on each other to feel important. They still need likes, approval, and groupthink to back up their every move. But you built an inner engine. You don't need to be seen to know you're valuable. You don't need to be heard to know you're powerful. You move with quiet force, and people feel it even when you're not in the room. That's what terrifies them now. While they stayed codependent and predictable, you became dangerous in your independence. Not loud, not desperate, just effective. And there's nothing more threatening to a crowd than someone who learned how to thrive completely alone. Number 7. They removed you from the room, but now you've become the entire building. They thought excluding you would shrink your value, that by making sure you weren't on the guest list, in the group chat or at the table, they could reduce your influence. They wanted to make your presence feel small, forgettable even. What they never expected was that the very absence they created would make people start noticing the gap, the difference in energy, the difference in substance. The moment you were removed, something felt off, and deep down everyone in the room felt it. See, they didn't understand that you were never just there to fill space. You were the atmosphere. You were the spark in the conversation, the depth in the dialogue, the soul in the whole damn environment. And when they cut you out, they thought they were doing damage to you. But all they really did was drain their own rooms of relevance. Because when you disappeared, so did the originality, the integrity, the vibrancy. They didn't replace you, they exposed themselves. You didn't run around begging to be included. You went and built something bigger. You became the building. You became the foundation people want to stand on, the energy they want to align with, the truth they feel drawn to. People now come to you for the gathering, for the insight, for the light. You don't have to knock on doors anymore. You are the door. And the ones who tried to shut you out? They're now trying to figure out how to re-enter your orbit without looking like the very snakes they were. They're nervous, because standing next to you now means standing next to everything they tried to kill in you. And you didn't just survive, you leveled up in full view. So now when your name is mentioned, it's not with pity, it's with power. You went from being uninvited to being unavoidable. And that's a transformation they'll never be able to sit comfortably around. Number 8, they underestimated the power of a mind left alone to heal. They thought leaving you alone would make you spiral, that without constant noise, attention, or interaction, you'd lose your grip. But what they didn't realize is that solitude is a sanctuary for people who are ready to face what others run from. While they were scrolling, gossiping, and avoiding themselves through busyness and chaos, you were sitting with your pain, raw, unfiltered, and unmedicated. And it was in that silence, in that unbearable stillness, where the real healing began. They've been conditioned to fear quiet because it reveals truth, but you leaned into it. You confronted the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. The grief, the abandonment, the unspoken rage. You didn't just look at your wounds, you studied them. You learned how they got there, who caused them, and most importantly, how to never let it happen again. You met your younger self in that silence. You met your triggers, your patterns. You broke the cycles they hoped would keep you weak. They underestimated what happens when a powerful mind is given time to breathe. They didn't think you'd survive that isolation, but you didn't just survive, you transformed. You began sharpening your discernment, calming your nervous system, rewiring your thoughts. You didn't need validation anymore because you started giving yourself something deeper, understanding. And that understanding turned into confidence, then wisdom, then power. Now they see it in your eyes, that centered energy, that unshakable peace. You're no longer reactive, you're intentional, you're not desperate to be liked. You're dangerous because you don't need anything from them anymore. And it's not your success that haunts them, it's the fact that you're whole. You're no longer fractured, no longer easy to manipulate. And when someone becomes whole, they become unpredictable. They become untouchable. That's what they fear now, not what you do, but who you've become. And the truth is, they didn't break you. They accidentally gave you the conditions to become your final form. Number 9. They called you hard to love. Now they're bitter, watching you be loved effortlessly. They told you over and over that you were too much. Too intense, too complicated, too proud, too sensitive. They made you question every part of yourself until you almost believed that the fault lay in your very existence. That maybe, if only you softened or shrank, love would come easier. But that was a lie designed to keep you small, to keep you desperate for approval from people who never truly saw your worth. What they couldn't handle was your authenticity, the realness that scared them because it shone a light on their own insecurities and masks. They called you hard to love, not because you were, but because they were unwilling or unable to meet you where you truly lived. They expected you to settle for scraps of affection, to lower your standards, and to quiet your brilliance so they could feel comfortable next to you. When you refused, they twisted the narrative, making you the villain in your own story. But here's the truth they never saw coming. The very things they rejected became the magnets that drew in people who understood your value deeply and naturally. Your standards weren't barriers, they were boundaries protecting something precious. Your intensity wasn't a flaw, it was fire. Your presence wasn't overwhelming, it was magnetic. People who are worthy didn't find your love hard to earn. They found it rare and sacred. They cherish you for exactly who you are because your love carries power, healing, and truth. Now the ones who gaslit you are bitter, watching from the sidelines as you're loved effortlessly, loved in ways they never knew how to give. They realized too late that the problem was never you. It was their inability to rise up and meet your soul's frequency. And while they're stuck replaying the old story, you're busy living a new reality where you're celebrated, honored, and adored simply for being unapologetically yourself. Number 10. They tried to make you invisible, but you became inevitable. They thought that if they pretended you didn't exist, you'd simply fade into nothingness. They pushed you out of conversations, erased your contributions, and acted like your ideas and presence were invisible. They believed invisibility would silence you, shrink your influence, and make you irrelevant. What they didn't realize is that ignoring someone who's meant to be seen only makes them stronger. You didn't just survive their efforts to bury you, you became a force of nature. Your absence created a vacuum that couldn't be filled. The quieter they tried to make you, the louder your impact echoed. Your name is now whispered in the very places they tried to keep it silent. They try to act like you're not there, but your energy, your truth, lingers like a shadow they can't shake off. It's in the way people talk about you, the way your work shows up in conversations, and the way your influence seeps into spaces they thought were safe from you. You became inevitable, not because you chased the spotlight, but because you carried a kind of authenticity and power that demands recognition. You're not a memory. They're haunted by your presence. And every time they try to move on, your influence pulls them back in. You don't need to be loud or aggressive. Your presence alone disrupts their plans and exposes their fears. They tried to make you invisible, but invisibility only made you mysterious. It made people curious. It made your eventual rise unavoidable. Now, instead of fading, you're the force that refuses to be ignored. The energy that changes the room before you even walk in. They wanted you erased. Instead, they created something inevitable. Number 11. They thought you'd come back begging, but you came back unbothered. They expected you to crawl back, head down, desperate for scraps of approval and connection. Their whole strategy hinged on making you feel so isolated and unworthy that you'd be begging for even the smallest piece of their attention. But you didn't just survive the hunger. They underestimated your ability to nourish yourself. You learned how to stand firm without their approval, how to find belonging within yourself instead of in their fleeting gestures. What they called cold or ungrateful is actually strength forged in fire. You stopped waiting by the phone. You stopped asking for reasons to stay. You rewired your brain to find satisfaction in your own growth, peace in your own company, and power in your own decisions. Your independence isn't some ego trip, it's pure liberation from their control. Now, when they see you moving on so smoothly, so confidently, it rattles them. Because it exposes their own weaknesses, their neediness, their insecurity, and their dependence on others to feel valid. You became a living contradiction to their narrative, the one they tried to write about you being broken and begging. Instead, you're whole and unshaken. You don't just walk away. You stride, unapologetically unbothered. This isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming yourself. You didn't come back begging because you never lost yourself in the first place. And that truth? It's a mirror they can't bear to face. Your calm, steady independence shines a light on their desperation. They wanted to see you shattered, but all they got was a reflection of their own fragility. And that's the real power. You came back not weakened, but unbreakable. Number 12. They thought isolation was a cage. You turned it into a command center. They thought locking you away from the crowd would break your spirit and scatter your focus. To them, isolation was a punishment. A cage meant to trap your mind in confusion and despair. But you turned that supposed prison into a command center. Instead of going mad, you found clarity. Instead of losing yourself, You discovered exactly who you are and what you want. While others were distracted by noise and constant validation, you were busy strategizing your next moves. You used the silence to map out your vision, to understand your strengths, weaknesses, and the battlefield around you. You became the general who can see every angle, every player, every opportunity, even when no one else notices. It's not just survival, it's mastery. Now you don't rush. You don't act on impulse. You move with precision, backed by a clarity born from sitting alone long enough to truly listen to your own truth. You see the patterns others miss because you've been observing from the sidelines. You anticipate their moves before they even think them. That kind of intelligence can't be faked or borrowed. It's earned in the silence. And the irony? The people who tried to cage you are watching, baffled. They see you executing plans with calm confidence, while they're still scrambling in the noise, lost and reactive. They don't understand that your power comes from your ability to be alone, not lonely, and to face yourself fully. That's a skill they never developed because they never truly sat still. You turned their cage into your war room, and now that you've emerged, you're not just surviving their games, you're winning them. It's not just about moving differently, it's about moving smarter, with a vision so sharp it cuts through all their noise and confusion. They wanted to trap you, but you used that time to build an empire in your mind, and now the whole world will see it. Number 13. They couldn't contain your light, so they tried to hide it. Now it's blinding them. They thought your light was a flicker, easily snuffed out. They believed that by isolating you, keeping you away from the spotlight, and quieting your voice, they could put out the fire you carried inside. But they forgot a crucial truth. Light isn't something you can cage or dim by force. When it's genuine, it only grows brighter in darkness. Your brilliance wasn't meant to fit into their neat little boxes or comfortable lies. It shattered illusions they depended on, truths about who you really are, what you're capable of, and the power you hold. That scared them so much they tried to hide your light from the world, hoping it would make you less of a threat. Instead, that attempt only stoked your flame. You didn't just survive their efforts to dim you, you became blinding. Your presence now illuminates rooms in a way that makes it impossible for anyone to ignore you. They see you and are reminded of the very strength they tried to erase, the truths they tried to bury, and the potential they tried to suppress. And it hurts them deeply because your light exposes their weaknesses and failures. Now, they find themselves unable to look at you without discomfort, without a pang of regret or envy. Your glow is a constant, inescapable reminder of everything they lost control over. You didn't fade into the shadows like they wanted. You became the sun that outshines their darkness. And while they struggle to shield their eyes, the world sees clearly who you truly are. They tried to contain your light, but it was never theirs to control. Now it's their own blindness that's their punishment, because the more you shine, the more obvious it becomes that their plan to hide you was their greatest mistake. Number 14. They thought they were punishing you, but heaven was positioning you. They believed their tactics were punishment, like a slap meant to keep you small and under control. They thought by isolating you, excluding you from their circles, and treating you like you were less than, they were exercising power over your life. But what they didn't see was that this wasn't punishment at all. It was divine repositioning. While they were busy playing their petty politics, twisting narratives, and trying to shrink your influence, a higher force was quietly rerouting your path. Their rejection, their cold shoulder, their dismissal, it wasn't the end of your story. It was a powerful redirection. Instead of breaking you, it was setting the stage for your rise. The very walls they built to contain you became the foundation upon which you would stand, taller than ever before. This kind of positioning is not something you can fake or force. It's orchestrated with a precision that only the universe or God can manage. It's subtle and often invisible to those caught up in their own schemes. They thought their actions were punishments designed to keep you out of sight, but in reality, they were clearing the path ahead, cutting away distractions, false connections, and energy drains that might have held you back. Now, you're emerging in a way that shocks them. The very people who laughed at your struggles and doubted your worth are watching as you walk into rooms with a new kind of authority. They're forced to witness your growth, your confidence, and your success, and it's unbearable for them. What was meant to humiliate you now humiliates them, because your rise is undeniable and completely outside their control. They rejected you thinking they were ending your influence, but all they did was redirect it where it truly belonged, to a place where it could shine freely and fully. You're no longer in their narrative as a sidelined character. You've become the main event. The stage you stand on is not just any platform, it's the one that shows them clearly who underestimated whom. Their rejection was never a door closing, it was a redirection, a divine repositioning to a higher plane where your value is undeniable. And while they stew in regret and bitterness, you're standing tall, elevated exactly where you're meant to be, right in front of them, shining brighter than ever. The truth is, their attempts to isolate, diminish, and erase you have only served to reveal your true power, one that cannot be confined or controlled. Every strategy they deployed, every cold shoulder they turned, every whispered slight was a brick laid in the foundation of your ascent. What they saw as punishment was, in reality, preparation. What they thought would break you became the very fuel that ignited your transformation. You have emerged not just unbroken, but reborn, stronger, wiser, and more radiant than ever before. The isolation meant to silence your voice has amplified it. The rejection designed to diminish your presence has made you unforgettable. You have rewritten the script, turning their rejection into a redirection that leads to your ultimate triumph. Their plans to keep you small have backfired so spectacularly that now they are left choking on regret, powerless to stop the inevitable rise you embody. This journey is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the mysterious ways the universe conspires in favor of those who refuse to be defeated. It's a reminder that sometimes what feels like an ending is really a new beginning, an opening to something far greater than you ever imagined. You are living proof that true power isn't given. It's earned in the crucible of hardship, forged in the quiet moments of self-discovery, and revealed when you refuse to surrender to the limitations others try to impose. So stand tall in your victory. Celebrate the fact that the very forces that tried to bury you have instead positioned you on a pedestal. Let their regret be your reminder that your worth was never determined by their acceptance, but by your unwavering commitment to your own truth. This isn't just your comeback, it's your breakthrough. And as you move forward, remember that the light you carry now is so brilliant, it will not only illuminate your path, but also blind those who once tried to dim your flame. You are no longer just surviving their game, you are rewriting it entirely. And that is the most powerful response of all. If this message spoke to you, if you feel that fire of unstoppable strength burning inside, then don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button to join the community where we rise together, break free together, and rewrite our stories together. Like this video to show your power and commitment. Drop a comment below sharing your own journey or thoughts. We want to hear your truth. And most importantly, share this message with someone who needs to know they're not alone and that their comeback is already in motion. Your support fuels this movement. Let's keep growing, glowing, and conquering, one unstoppable step at a time. God bless you.